If I asked you to design the single most secure, most critical computer system on the face of the Earth, a system that would control the launch of the superpower's entire nuclear arsenal, what would you use? Take a moment and really picture it. You'd probably imagine quantum encryption, networks of artificially intelligent safeguards, biometric scanners, and the most advanced, bleeding edge, futuristic tech you could possibly conceive. It would be a system born from science fiction. For decades, the United States, the most technologically advanced nation in history, used an 8-inch floppy disk. This isn't the setup for a joke. It's the startling reality of how America controlled its most powerful and terrifying weapons. While the rest of the world raced into the future, creating smartphones, the internet, and the cloud, the absolute nerve center of the US nuclear triad, the system that holds the fate of civilization in its hands, deliberately relied on ancient technology. From the outside, it sounds like a catastrophic, almost comical flaw. It sounds like a world-ending disaster waiting to happen. But what if it wasn't a flaw? What if it was the system's single greatest and most ingenious feature? Today, we're telling the incredible story of why America's nuclear command system put its trust in a piece of plastic most people alive today have never even seen. Corby Larry here. Welcome to the channel. To truly understand this bizarre and counterintuitive choice, we have to go back in time. We have to go to the Cold War. This was an era defined by a constant, low-level hum of existential terror, governed by a terrifyingly simple logic: mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The concept was as stark as its acronym. Both the United States and the Soviet Union held the power to completely and utterly obliterate each other, and the only thing stopping them was the absolute certainty that any attack would be met with an equally devastating, world-ending counterattack. The sword of Damocles was hanging over all of civilization, held by the thinnest of threads. For this delicate, terrifying deterrent to work, one thing had to be absolutely, unconditionally guaranteed: the ability to communicate a launch order from the president to the forces in the field, no matter what. Imagine the chaos of a first strike. Communications would be crippled, infrastructure turned to rubble, the chain of command potentially shattered. This created a horrifying technical problem. How do you build a communication network that is completely fail-safe, utterly immune to enemy interference, and able to function perfectly in a world that is actively being torn apart by nuclear war? In response to this challenge, the U.S. Air Force developed the Strategic Automated Command and Control System, or SACCS. First brought online in the 1960s, SACCS was conceived as the digital backbone for America's nuclear triad: its land-based missiles, its nuclear-armed bombers, and its ballistic missile submarines. It was a system designed to transmit one thing and one thing only: emergency action messages, the coded orders from the highest levels of government to execute a nuclear strike. The solution they chose for this monumental task is where the story gets truly strange. The heart of this unbelievably critical system ran on an IBM Series 1 computer, a machine that dates back to the 1970s, and the method it used for loading its programs and coordinating its messages was the 8-inch floppy disk. Let's be clear, these weren't the smaller, hard-cased 3.5-inch disks you might dimly remember from a school computer lab in the 90s. These were the originals, the first of their kind: truly floppy, flimsy squares of plastic, about the size of a small dinner plate. They were capable of holding a staggering 80 kilobytes of data. To put that into perspective, a single medium-quality photo on your smartphone is thousands of kilobytes. A modern, cheap USB stick can hold the data of tens of millions of these disks. Yet, for decades, this 80 kilobyte piece of plastic was the key to coordinating the most destructive arsenal on Earth. News of this bizarre system broke into the public consciousness in 2014 when a 60 Minutes report gave the world a shocking glimpse inside a launch control center. The image of a military officer holding a giant antiquated floppy disk next to the controls for nuclear missiles was jarring, to say the least. It seemed like a critical oversight, a fossil from a bygone era that had somehow been forgotten in the most important room in the world. But it wasn't forgotten. It was a deliberate, calculated choice. The question everyone, from the public to security experts, was asking was why? The answer is both profoundly simple and brilliantly counterintuitive. It lies in a principle that has become almost alien in our hyper-connected, always-online world: security through absolute isolation. The military's decades-long reliance on this so-called ancient technology was not a bug, and it certainly was not an oversight. It was a stroke of genius. The brilliance of this seemingly archaic design came down to two fundamental factors. First, and most importantly, the SACCS was a digital fortress because it was physically and electronically disconnected from the outside world. This is a core concept in cybersecurity known as an air gap. The system had no network card, it had no Wi-Fi connection, it had no IP address. As Lieutenant Colonel Jason Rossi, a commander in charge of the system, famously stated, "You can't hack something that doesn't have an IP address." In an age of sophisticated state-sponsored cyber attacks, where everything from our power grids to our financial markets is a potential target, the SACCS was simply immune. It existed on its own private physical network. A hacker in Moscow or Beijing could have all the skill in the world, but they could never penetrate the system because there were no digital doors to kick down, no remote connections to exploit. The only way to interact with it was to physically be in that secure room and physically insert that floppy disk. Second, the system was a known, proven, and battle-tested quantity. It was built on the unshakable military principle of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The SACCS, with its 70s-era hardware, had been running reliably for decades. Its reliability was proven through countless drills and alerts. Its quirks were intimately understood. Its operations were flawlessly predictable, and generations of personnel knew it inside and out. Introducing a brand new, complex, networked software system would also introduce a universe of unknown vulnerabilities, potential bugs, and unforeseen failure points. In the world of nuclear command and control, where a single glitch or a moment of hesitation could genuinely have apocalyptic consequences, predictability is the ultimate currency. The old IBM computers and their floppy disks were simple, robust, and they just worked. Adding more features, more complexity, or connecting it to a network wouldn't have made it better, it would have only made it catastrophically more vulnerable. But even the most brilliant system can't last forever. While its age provided a unique and powerful form of security, it also created a ticking clock. The most significant and unavoidable problem was obsolescence. The world had long since stopped manufacturing 8-inch floppy disks and the specialized parts for IBM Series 1 computers. Finding replacements became a desperate scavenger hunt. When a critical component broke, you couldn't just order a new one from a supplier. The Air Force had to rely on a small, dedicated team of highly specialized technicians who could perform painstaking repairs at a microscopic level. They were, in essence, museum curators for a system that could not afford to fail for a single second. They were digital archaeologists, keeping a vital piece of history alive not for posterity, but for planetary security. Even more pressing was the human factor. The entire knowledge base for maintaining this unique system was concentrated in a handful of civilian and military experts, many of whom were nearing retirement. A 2016 government report specifically highlighted this very problem, warning that the shrinking pool of qualified experts was a significant long-term risk. The system was perfectly secure from outside hackers, but it was increasingly vulnerable to a much simpler and more relentless enemy: time itself. The very thing that made it so secure, its profound age, was also becoming its greatest liability. This story is a fascinating look into a hidden world where old tech was the best tech, a world where simplicity was the ultimate sophistication. It forces us to reconsider what security really means. But the evolution of security is always ongoing. What do you think is the biggest security challenge we face today in our own lives? Is it state-sponsored hacking, corporate data breaches, physical threats, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into the hidden side of military technology, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Recognizing the growing risks of hardware failure and knowledge drain, the Air Force finally initiated the system's next evolution. In 2019, the process of officially retiring the 8-inch floppy disks began. They were replaced with what officials described as a highly secure, solid-state digital storage solution. This move to modern, durable solid-state drives brought the system's data storage component into the 21st century. But it is absolutely crucial to understand what this upgrade did and what it didn't do. While the floppy disks are gone, the core philosophy of the system remains firmly intact. The modernization wasn't about connecting the nuclear command system to the internet or adding complex new software. It was about replacing a single, aging, and unsustainable component with a more reliable and maintainable modern equivalent, all while meticulously preserving the air-gapped security model that made it so effective in the first place. Think of it as replacing the crumbling foundation of an impenetrable fortress with new reinforced concrete, but without adding a single door or window. This is part of a much broader, ongoing effort to modernize the entire nuclear command, control, and communications, or NC3, architecture. The floppy disks are gone, but the invaluable lesson they taught, that ultimate security can lie in radical simplicity and isolation, endures. The story of the military's floppy disks is a powerful and fascinating paradox. It's a profound lesson in risk management and the eternal conflict between ever-increasing complexity and the need for fundamental security. For decades, in the most high-stakes environment imaginable on Earth, the most effective solution wasn't the newest, the fastest, or the most advanced. It was the simplest, the most predictable, and the most isolated. The system was a relic, but it was a deliberate one, a masterpiece of security design that was built to be impervious to the digital threats of a future it could not yet see. The fate of the world didn't rest on an 8-inch piece of plastic because of neglect or oversight, but because in a world of complex and ever-evolving digital threats, being unhackable, predictable, and completely offline was the ultimate form of security.